Hi, it's Chaplain Hart with another offering of some water from the well. Well, by now you're probably aware that if you're going to go into any of the post facilities, you're supposed to be wearing a face covering. Not like the one I'm wearing, of course. In fact, if you're a fan of Broadway or 80s and 90s pop culture, you might recognize this as the mask worn by the Phantom of the Opera in the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. And if you know that story, perhaps you know the backstory. There was no phantom at all. It was a young boy who had been born with a horribly disfigured face that had been abandoned by his mother in the catacombs and the tunnels underneath the city of Paris. And this young boy had found his way into the bowels of the Paris Opera House, where over the years his cries and his wails of anguish had led people to believe that the theater was haunted. It wasn't haunted at all. It was just a boy who had grown into a man who wore a mask to conceal the thing that had brought him so much shame and so much pain and misery and ultimately rejection. But he used the mask as a weapon to control and to instill fear into the people that he was afraid were going to reject him. And sometimes we can wear masks. Now, we don't wear them on our face like this, but sometimes we can wear masks on our hearts. Masks that conceal the things that perhaps we're ashamed of or that we're not proud of. Our insecurities, our fears, knowledge of things that we've done in the past that we don't want anyone to know about. Fears that we don't want anyone to know about. Sometimes those masks look like, I've got it all together, or I am too blessed to be stressed, when we know that's not true, because life as a human being involves tribulation. But those masks sometimes are also effective at keeping other things out. Not only do they keep out rejection and ridicule and shame, but they can keep out authentic connection. They can keep out genuine relationship. And so a lot of times our chapels and our churches, perhaps even our families, resemble more of a masquerade ball than they do congregations of the redeemed. In the Bible, in 2 Corinthians 5:17, the Apostle Paul says, if anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. The old has passed away and the new has come. You see, we're no longer defined by those things that we might be afraid of. We're not defined by our failures and our shortcomings and our fears and our insecurities. We're defined by what Christ did for us on the cross. In fact, we celebrate that very thing this weekend, the very thing that redefines us and gives us our identity. We celebrate on Easter the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. We no longer need be afraid of those things that we use those masks to cover. We no longer need to worry that if anyone could see behind the mask, they might not love me. Because in Christ, we don't need the mask anymore. In Genesis 2:25, the very end of the creation story, there's kind of an odd verse at the end of the chapter. It says, and the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. And that's the ideal for our relationships, not just between husbands and wives, but among us all. That we can stand before one another without shame, without the need to conceal our shortcomings that we all have, without our need to conceal the need for our forgiveness that we all have. Because our identity, ultimately, is not in what we think of one another. It's in what God thinks of us. And God has very clearly demonstrated what he thinks of us by what he did on the cross 2,000 years ago and by what we celebrate this weekend, the death, burial, and the resurrection of Christ. So in the days and weeks and who knows, perhaps months to come, as you go around with these coverings, let's make sure we take these coverings off and extend to one another the grace that was so richly poured out on us. God bless you and have a very blessed Easter.